we have then Vincent here. Vincent is the founder of PyData Amsterdam. He usually prefers common sense over hype and is quite famous around the YouTube PyData circuit. He's obsessed about artificial stupidity and not solving the wrong problem. Beyond of jokes, Vincent is also mad about Pokemon. So tonight, and we're talking about chatbots. It's nice to have you here, Vincent. Welcome.
Okay. Hi. Nice introduction. Thanks. One small correction. I wasn't the founder. It was like a bunch of people who were there. So in that sense, I'm more of a co-founder. But thanks nonetheless. But yeah, I think I have like half an hour to talk a little bit about chatbots and some stuff that people might find interesting about it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do like 10 minutes of theory, then I'm going to do like 10 minutes of demo, and then I'll show you what actually the real problem is, because you might be solving the wrong problem also when you're dealing with chatbots. So my name is Vincent, and I work at Rasa. I'm their research advocate, which means that I sit between the research team as well as the developer advocate team. And my role is that I make educational content and that I talk to the researchers, and that sort of I make sure that everyone building a chatbot understands these complex algorithms that we make for them. And it's a really sweet gig. There's cool stuff to do. But one thing that I just briefly want to show you is if you Google right now for like state-of-the-art chatbot, then you're gonna come to this website. You might not come to this website, but a website like this one. And what I just want to debunk a little bit is which chatbots actually do make it to production and which ones don't. People can see the screen, right? Just to make sure people can. Okay, so if you go to conf.ai.huggingface.co, you see this website that's sort of a unicorn, and then how to build a state-of-the-art conversational AI with transfer learning. And first and foremost, I do want to point out that what they're doing here is actually quite impressive. They're doing a lot of things right here. But at the same time, I'm going to show you that this is probably not a good idea for production. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm just going to start talking to this random personality. So I say, hello. Hello, how are you doing? I am good. I want to buy a pizza. And the person says, okay, I just got done eating my pizza. And I can say, that's great. But I want to order one for me. And then says I can get you a pizza. Okay, sure. What kind? And the thing is, it's actually generating proper human sentences here, right? This is like grammatically correct. And the assistant, or chatbot in this case, really understands that it's about pizza. But you kind of see it, it's generating stuff that's related, and that's, of course, an achievement. But this is not something you're going to put into production. Like on one end of the spectrum, you might just have a static form, which is not really interactive. And I guess this is something that is on the other end of the spectrum where, sure, there's lots of generative freedom and we have deep learning at our disposal. But what you're going to put in production is something probably in between. Because a system like this is probably given a very large corpus of text to just learn to generate from. But suppose there's like curse words in here. I mean, you're not guaranteed that you're going to get something that the user is going to like. So even though this indeed in some way is state-of-the-art, it's not something I'm going to put into production. So I figure that's kind of a good starting point because at Rasa, we are in the business of making these assistants that do actually go to production. So that means that we are usually building other tools and different architectures than what the people at Hugging Face are doing. Even though I do want to mention some of the stuff that they do actually is state-of-the-art. So I'll just skip the text. What I figured might be interesting is just sort of show you how I think a conversation should actually kind of go. And I'll just, you folks can't see it, but I've got this thing in the way. It's now kind of gone. But let's say we've got this conversation and sort of how it's supposed to go. So we've got this little user here that's, let's say, logging in. And then the user says hello. And then we've got this lovely little robot that replies and says hi. The user says, I'd like to have a pizza. And then this assistant says, okay, what kind? Meanwhile, this human over here says, by the way, are you a human? And then there's two replies from the visual assistant. The assistant says, no, I'm a bot. And what kind of pizza would you like? You have to pick up the conversation. And this is a conversation in which an interrupt happens in the normal flow of the conversation. But Rasa, these are the conversations that we're worried about. These are the conversations that have to happen in a good way. if you were to take a moment and parse this, so in this conversation, what are things that we want to detect? Well, I could argue that, sure, someone says hello and then hi, but at some point in time over here, someone is making clear that they want to buy something, but in particular, the product they want to buy is the pizza. So you can say one thing we have to detect here is that there's an entity there. As far as text goes, that is something we have to retrieve from it. Furthermore, every time a user says something, you can argue that for each utterance, there's some sort of an intent. And certain intents also contain an entity. For example, if you want to buy something, it is relatively useful to also mention what the thing is that you want to buy. But the goal of a chatbot is to take these intents, as well as these entities, and the entire conversation, and to turn those into actions. Actions in this particular case are just, give you text back. But if I think out loud, an action here could also mean, for example, hey, if this action is triggered, then some sort of lambda function with Python has to run somewhere. So we could say, hey, someone wants to order a type of pizza, and then we have to check, do we even sell that kind of pizza? We have to make a database call. And you can have some custom Python logic in the middle there as well. But what Rasa offers is a system that's all open source that handles this intent detection, as well as this entity detection and this action decision-making mechanism. So that's a system that we like building. And the idea behind it is that then you, as a user, if you want to constrain the system, if you want to prevent it from learning curse words or replies that are wrong, you as a designer can say, well, these are the intents that I want this system to detect. These are the entities that I want the system to detect. And these are the only actions that the assistant is able to take. And that's a nice constraint. That is something that will make something go to production as opposed to being maybe something that's academic. But that also means that the way that you're going to deal with data is going to be substantially different than what you may be used to. Because typically how people use scikit-learn is you have something of an X on one end, and then you have something of a pipeline, fit predict, and then predictions are the thing that come out. But note that in this particular case, there's only one thing that comes out. But as the example hopefully points out, how people use Rasa is, well, there's text coming in, like a sequence of text and actions has just happened. And we have to figure out what the actual intent is, maybe what entity was in there, and take the action. And only when we have these elements can we have a nice dialogue happen. So we're not just predicting one thing. We need to think about a system where we can do multiple things at the same time. So that also means, first and foremost, that whenever you're building a chatbot, you're probably not going to start with import pandas and then reading in a CSV file that contains the conversations. You need some different data format. If you're looking at what conversations are like over here, then you could probably feel that there's something more nested, that we cannot just have a CSV file to handle all of this. So what I'm going to talk about is what 4 files you typically need in order to get a chatbot started, and then I'll just give you a small demo of an open source chatbot that I'm making that people can contribute to as well. But I hope that so far we're clear that we're interested in building a system, and that CSV files are typically not going to cut it when it comes to information that we need to feed this system. So when we're talking about data, we basically need 2 files, and these are markdown files, but these are kind of domain-specific languages in these markdown files, if you will. For starters, we have this file called nlu.md, and it stands for Natural Language Understanding. And the idea behind it is that you can use 2 bangs to indicate that there's going to be a new intent. You write down intent : then the name of the intent. And what you can then do is just give lots of examples of someone making an utterance that belongs to that intent. So if you want to greet, hey, hello, hi, good morning, hey there, these are all valid ways to greet someone. So we can have lots of examples appear for that one intent. And you see that happen down below here with goodbye. And you also see an intent here that's called affirm. And the idea is that these examples will eventually be used for a classifier to detect a certain intent. The hope is that we then have sort of these Lego bricks, that each intent is then something that you can use to construct a story. The idea there being is that then you have a classifier for these different intents, but a sequence of them with the appropriate response, that's an actual dialogue. And that is something that we like to save in a different markdown file called stories. And the idea there is that a story has a name. So for example, this story over here is called the happy path story. And what we're telling the system is, well, in the past, someone had a greet intent, and then we raised the utter greet action. That's an action that came from the dialogue system. After that, the user said something with this intent in mind, and then we correctly replied by saying utter happy. And again, these are names of actions that are being taken. But the nice thing is, because we have these examples of these intents over here, we can use a file like this to generate lots of training data on our behalf. We have examples of greetings, and we have examples of when someone says that they were happy. So that means that we can construct training data. Another benefit is that, for example, if someone says that they are sad, so we start with a greeting, we greet. Someone says that they are unhappy, then we can also say, well, there's two actions that have to follow up on each other. That is also possible in the syntax. And the nice thing about that is we can also have a system that looks at these actions that are happening as a time series task as well. So we don't just have to do, hey, what intent is it and what action has to follow, but we can also do some clever things where we take the history into account as well. That what happened, let's say, 6 dialogue steps ago is something that will influence what next action I'm going to do right now. But I hope that it's clear that we need something of a data format like this. And I hope that we appreciate this notion of a language Lego brick, if you will, if we have these intents and these actions that we have to generate and detect. There's 2 final files that you will need. And one of these files is the domain.yaml file. And the idea is that that's the file where you're going to define all of the intents that you're going to be using. And this is also the place where if you're just going to give simple text responses, that you can say, if there's ever the utter greet action, then I just have to send this text back over here. In the example that I've got down below in this file is that we're just sending text back. But what we can also configure here is a Python function to run instead. So we can also run custom Python code or retrieve information from a database in an action here. Finally, the other thing that you're going to need is something of a config file that just says what machine learning algorithms that you'll be using. And we have a convenient YAML format for that, but know that everything that we have in a pipeline over here, in the end, is Python code that's running on your behalf. Just like scikit-learn, we have all of these different components that you can use, and things like the count vectors featureizer. This is actually something from scikit-learn that you can just go ahead and use inside of here. We just wrote a wrapper around for it. Now, I'm not going to go too much in depth in all the different features that are in here because that can get quite complex. But do know that you can write your own custom components, but it's probably a lot easier to just get started with this base configuration that we give you. So that means that I'm going to now open up a Rasa project that has these 4 files. The config.yaml file has the machine learning settings. The main.yaml file has an overview of all the intents and responses. And then we have the stories and NLU data that have these examples of intents and entities. Oops. And let's get Visual Studio Code here. There we go. People can see this is the, like in terms of font size, is good? Okay, nice. And I have to now move this dialog window from Zoom so that I can read it. So what I've done here is if you go to GitHub and you type Pokédex demo, you'll find a community project that I've started. What I want to do is I would like to make a chatbot that is meant for Pokemon fans to answer questions that you may or may not have about Pokemon. The reason why I figured it would be fun is because it's actually kind of hard, because people can ask all sorts of weird questions about it. It's also something that's domain heavy that I don't know too much about, so I have a non-technical colleague who's helping me out with this. But it's also a nice example because it allows me to demonstrate what some intents might be. So we see the common greeting, goodbye, affirm stuff that I've shown you earlier as well. But what I've now also added is this intent to demand a joke. So there's all of these examples where the user is telling the chatbot, hey, I want you to make me laugh. Please give me a Pokemon-themed joke, please. That is something that I've got lots of examples for over here. What I've also got is I have this feature where maybe a user tells the chatbot, hey, here's a name of a Pokemon, but does it even exist? Is this actually a Pokemon name? I mean, Hadoop, it sounds like a Pokemon name, but it can also just be a big data technology. So one feature that I also want to have is that the assistant itself is able to tell me whether or not it's a Pokemon. And that means that I also need to have a way of saying, hey, this is now an entity that you have to detect. So by putting square brackets around the token and by putting the type of entity after it, I'm able to declare that this is an entity that the system also needs to detect. After that, there's also some frequently asked questions. So like, what is Pokemon? How many Pokemon are there? I mean, these are some extra intents that I've added. And finally, what I've done is I've added a lookup table. And the nice thing about this is I can say, look, I'm not going to put all 800 Pokemon as an example in my training file here. Instead, what I can just do is give it this text file with all the names in it. And then it's able to just say, that's a synonym map. If I see any of those, then that's a Pokemon name. I can just go with that. So this is my NLU data. And then I've got my stories.md file over here. And one of the main things that you can see is that there's this conversation where someone is greeting, and then I'm greeting back. Then someone is asking, hey, are you a human or are you a bot? I can say, well, I'm a bot. Then someone demands a joke and then confirms whether or not a Pokemon exists. And this is just an example of a story that could happen. Finally, I've got this domain.yaml file where I have all of my intents and my actions defined. It's kind of like config style. And then if I scroll down, you can see that this utter joke action just has a whole list of, pretty bad Pokemon puns. This is an open source project, so 2 weeks ago, I had a guy from New Zealand just put a couple of Pokemon jokes in here. The cool thing about this project is I didn't even get half of these jokes, but it's a community thing, so people can just go ahead and add some jokes in here. But what's especially nice is I typed this command earlier, rasa shell, and this was right after I typed rasa train. And if you type rasa init in the command line, if you just pip install rasa, you'll get a project like this. And it has a bunch of files, but the nice thing right after rasa init and rasa train, you can type rasa shell and you can talk to your digital assistant that you've made with these files. So I can type hello, it says, hey, how are you? And I can tell it to give me a funny joke. And check the laundry. I found one of your sock. I'm assuming sock is a Pokemon name, but you get the idea. This is the idea, like it's detecting a proper intent. Now, there's one final feature that I just want to very, very briefly show you, and that has to do with this entity over here. So I told you about this one feature that I had. Like, I would really like this chatbot to be able to confirm if Bulbasaur is an Pokemon that exists. And it's not too far of a stretch to say, well, that's kind of something you would have in production. Like, you would have to check the database if something actually exists. So that's something that is sort of what you would expect in real life. Now, in my domain.yaml file here, and if this is feeling like I'm going over it very fast, it's because I am. There is this action check existence that I have in my list of actions here. And it also happens to be that I have this actions.py file where I have this object called action check existence that has a method implemented called name that returns action check existence. And this is something that you can run in a Docker container, but this is just some custom code where I'm able to just get the message from the dialog system with all the detected entities, with all the detected intents and all the probabilities and all those things that the machine learning system handles for you. And it is something that you can use here to just return a custom response. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying, hey, get the Pokemon name. And if the Pokemon name is in my self.knowledge file, okay, then send one response back and otherwise send another one. So if I were to type here, does Ninetales exist? Then it says over here, I do not recognize Ninetales. And what you saw is there was a bunch of text pop up over here. That's because over here, I'm running this action server that's able to pretend to be a Docker container that gets a message from the NLU system and is able to do custom responses on my behalf. So I can also ask, is Raza a Pokemon? And it's made a mistake here, but you get the idea. Oh, this is actually an interesting one. Does Raza exist? Okay, it's confused here. A final demo that I just quickly want to show you is I can type Raza shell here, but what I can also do is type Raza shell NLU. And the cool thing about that is that this is also going to give me the opportunity to do a little bit of debugging, because this is going to also show me all the associated probabilities that occur whenever I'm talking to my assistant. So I can type something like, hello there. And you can definitely see that there's all of these intents. It thinks that greet is the most likely one. And you can also verify that there's no entities detected. And if you want to get a little bit more of a glimpse inside of the system, this can be a great way to do it. Now, what I've just done is giving you like a super quick overview of what Raza can do. And in half an hour time, there's not really a whole lot that I can do beyond just this basic demo. But I am giving a full workshop this Wednesday, if you're interested, where we're going to start from scratch. And if you want to build your own chatbot, we'll start with nothing and we'll do the pip install. And then we'll have something that looks like this, something that also can give you a bad joke by the end of the workshop. So if that's something of interest, then definitely check that out. Before going away, though, I do want to make this one point about that you might be solving the wrong problem when you're trying to build a chatbot like this. And that's something that's worth pointing out. Because everything that I've done here is just from the command line, but you can assume that there's also a grid search that you're able to do. You can search for hyperparameters and you can optimize, etc. But if I were then to draw this Venn diagram, and let's make it stick. So if I were to draw this Venn diagram, like one thing that's going to happen is, let's say that this is the data set that we've collected, right? And that also means that this is the data that we're going to optimize for. So we have all of these intents that we are coming up with examples, etc. So we're going to do a grid search. We're going to optimize for that data set. But if I'm going to then put that into production, what's probably going to happen is that there's a slightly different data set that users care about. It might very well be that I'm coming up with a data set over here that has really good spelling, that has no inconsistent language behavior, and it's also very well possible that the stories that I came up with are in the wrong order, that the users are actually interested in doing it slightly differently. So in practice, what a lot of data teams do is they just pray that this is a really big overlap and that way they can still do all of their grid search stuff. And this is something that's rather general to what I think is happening in machine learning. I mean, you can also have this problem in scikit-learn. It's not necessarily something that is unique to chatbots. This is a phenomenon that I like to call mean squared terror, because you can get in this really awkward position that these numbers over here are fantastic, they're great, but then the moment you put it into production, everything comes crumbling down. So like, we are aware of this phenomenon at Raza, and we would just hate if that was going to happen to us. So that is why we also made this tool that is free, but it's not open source. Like if you want to use it for your own chatbot, go ahead and download it. But if you're going to host it somewhere and charge other people for it, then we kindly ask you not to do that. But what we have done is we've made this labeling tool. And the idea essentially is that you can very easily, wait, I have to now use this screen to make this smaller. There you go. I think people should be able to see this. So what we've made is this small little, if you will, server that you can run. It has a nice little link to GitHub. So all the files we just had, we can sync them up together. So CI/CD is something that's way easier now. But what's even cooler is there's all of this training data of users that have been talking to this chatbot. So one of the questions I've gotten apparently is, do you know Pikachu? That's something that a user asked me. Can you teach me about Vincent's love for Pokemon? Apparently that's a feature request from a user. So this is something that I can say, well, that's bad or good. What I can do then, I can relabel there's this big, nice little retrain button. So if I have new labeled data, I can click train, and it's going to retrain a new model on that system. Then eventually that new model is going to pop up here. So I can sort of immediately to production say, hey, let's pick a different model. But the coolest feature of everything here, and we're going to try to do this live, is there's this button that says share with guests. And what I can do is I can have a demo up here. It's not the best name, but I can now generate this link. And if I were to open that in, let's say, this browser, I do have to open it in a different browser because of cookies and stuff. But what I should now be able to do is I should be able to type hello here. And I get a response. It says, hi, I'm a chatbot. I'm a bot that will help you catch them all. Right now, I am only talk spelling error, a little bit about Pokemon names. My features are being built as we speak. Is there anything you'd like me to be able to do in the future? So the idea is I have no idea what my users want with this chatbot. So the only way for me to figure that out is to just ask the user directly. And what I'll just do here is I'll just sing the Team Rocket theme song. I suppose this is something of a feature request, and the chatbot says, okay, that's registered. Would we like to do anything else? But what I should now also be able to do, it's the text message from my girlfriend, but I should now be able to, if I can find the browser, there we go. But I should now be able to go back to my NLU training data. Wait, it's not there. Oh, there you go. So someone spoke to me the sentence, sing the Team Rocket theme song, suggest features. So this is something that I can just throw out there in real life. So if you're a team and you're designing this chatbot, it's pretty easy to get this in front of domain experts or like people who aren't techies and just get their response in. And I think that feedback cycle, if anything else, that's going to make your chatbot better. And there's like a couple of views. You can look at the entire conversation, but we think the combination of what we do with the research team of our algorithms together with this, that is going to be a really cool way for people to interact with chatbots. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to share this link somewhere in, I think in the chat. I think people can then sort of click around if I'm not mistaken. So that's the URL. It's HTTP, by the way, not HTTPS. I'm aware of that. I had to implement that. Sorry about that. But what we should now be able to do is if some people were to talk to that thing, please don't like do cursing or anything like that because it is live. But then we should see some conversations appear here if I click refresh. And just a little demo, I think, will be nice. So again, this is a super high overview. This is what Raza sort of tries to do. This is stuff that I'm working on. So if this sounds interesting, definitely reach out to me on Twitter. Also, if you're interested, me together with some colleagues, we're making a couple of YouTube channels where we explain algorithms. So if that's something that you're interested in, definitely reach out. And if you want to sort of play with this, we're going to start from scratch on Wednesday. I believe this is the Python Ireland meetup. Someone is nodding, so yes, this is the Python Ireland meetup. But yeah, that's about everything I think I wanted to share. And also looking at the time, I think I'm a little bit over. So I'll gladly answer any questions, and I hope people like what they saw.
Thank you. That was awesome. Yeah, I can't wait to like build my own now.
You can't wait to be at home now?
No, to build my own chatbot now. Sorry.
Ah, okay. So it's like I think everyone's at home now, but, but
yeah, it's mandatory. No.
Yeah, that's what to say. Okay, yeah. No, but this is Raza. I hope people sort of think this is interesting. There's definitely way more to it. Like the machine learning can get super complex. Ask me anything about it, but it's definitely a cool thing to play with. That is certainly true.
Yeah, that looks awesome. That really, really cool. Do we have any questions for Vincent? Let's see.
And if people are tired on like a Monday, I get that because it's a Monday.
Vincent, I'll have one just to sort of get the ball rolling here. You're the organizer of PyData Amsterdam, or a co-organizer. I believe you have an event coming up. Oh.
So I am no longer an organizer, actually. There's a group of lovely people who took over, but after 4 or 5 years, I have sort of passed on the torch, so to say. But what you're going for is actually something that's worth to mention. That's certainly true. Because you're talking about the festival thing that people are organizing.
Yeah.
Yes. No, so it's actually a really cool idea. So people at PyData Amsterdam, we were really like bummed out there wasn't going to be an event, right? Because people want to have like stroopwafels and stuff and like good talks and whatever. So we were seriously bummed out about that. It was going to be like our 5th year, so it was also a bummer. So the idea is, instead of doing like an online event where you have to sit behind your laptop for the entire day, the idea is we're just going to have a full week where every day has a theme. I believe fairness is going to be a theme, like production Python will be a theme. There's a couple of days with themes. And in the morning, there'll be a workshop on every day. And in the evening, there'll be like 1-2 talks or maybe like a lightning round session. But that way, we still have this community vibe going on. People can have a Slack channel where they can hang out for a week. There'll be a programming challenge. So all that stuff will be good fun. But it's going to be spread out over an entire week. And all the proceeds go to NumFocus because financially it makes sense to raise a bit of money for them. With all these conferences not happening, it'd be nice to still have some money for open source there. So that's definitely happening. But in all fairness, I'm not organizing that. The Marisha and Matthijs are 2 people who you might want to Google for extra information. But if you ping me on Twitter, I will definitely proxy you forward to them. There's rumors that if you're from abroad and you're buying a ticket, there's going to be an airmail stroopwafel. It's a rumor. I can't confirm or deny, but it's a rumor.
Just in case people don't know, can you just briefly 2-minute description of NumFocus? Because
I mean, don't quote me on this because I might so I think that what I'm allowed to say is correct, but there might be a detail missing. But a couple of years ago, folks noticed that open source is great, but it's lacking a bit of funding. So the idea was, hey, how about we organize a bunch of conferences, and that can be something of a fundraiser. And also, if we do that often and across the world, we might get more enthusiasm going, and we can have this nice, inclusive community. So PyData, in that sense, is one of the ways on which NumFocus is able to raise money for numerical programming packages, typically Python, but also in some other languages. And the idea is that there's something of a funding to help some of these open source projects maintained, so to say. So that's essentially what NumFocus tries to do. And PyData, I believe, is like one branch that I'm very familiar with, but they also have other activities, of which I know much less than PyData. It's mainly PyData that I'm familiar with. But they do good work as far as raising some money for open source guys.
Good stuff. I believe the website is numfocus.org.
I think that's accurate, yes.
Okay, good stuff, yeah. I have a few more questions, but I'll let any other people come in. I'll keep going. So, just another one actually is just again sort of on the PyData theme, the PyData conferences theme. Can you tell us anything about PyData Global later in the year? Are you involved in that?
I'm not, actually. So I can confirm it's happening, and I think right now they are looking for volunteers. Like I believe that people if you're really into PyData, one thing I can recommend you if you want to meet people and sort of get a little bit more grips of all these packages. If you're an organizer, that really gives you a nice little window into sort of, I mean, you get to hang out with some of the core committers and you get a nice little exposure happening for you. I mean, I'm not suggesting you should go ahead and be a chair or something, because that's a lot of work. That's also why I was really happy to pass the torch. But definitely, it's something to keep an eye on. I remember when I was starting out with this whole data science thing, like 5 years ago, and it wasn't a PyData, and I was super bummed because you would go to YouTube and it would be like this really affordable conference with like-minded people all learning about data. And I think PyData, fundamentally, is probably like the best bang for your buck if you're interested in learning and you're starting out in data science. That's, I think, the one thing that PyData really offers really nicely. It's a nice little community of like-minded peers who are just interested in learning from each other. So I do know that the global thing is happening. The Amsterdam thing is going to be like a week thing, and I believe the global thing as well. I'm not saying it. I don't want to suggest that they stole our idea. The only thing that I'm saying is we have stroopwafels. So, yeah. But I believe that they are definitely looking for volunteers. And if you're interested in learning more about Python and you're a student, this can be a great way to get into the community. That is something I can definitely recommend.
Good stuff. PyData Amsterdam conference is due to go back live next year. Is that the plan?
I'm assuming so. Like again, I'm no longer formally organizing. Like I help out where I can, but I'm sort of more the guy with the beard. That's sort of there for advice. But I'm assuming people are really interested in doing it again. But I mean, there's so many forces at play here that it's really hard to predict. Like the venue sponsor might no longer have the venue. That sort of stuff we have to maybe keep in mind as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, essentially what I'm teeing up is a sort of, to the audience, is to start thinking about presenting talks and sort of prepare little projects and stuff like that, and use this virtual session here that we do every Monday as an opportunity to sort of practice a dry run of a talk, and then, you know, later on down the line, you know, go over to Amsterdam or Berlin or somewhere like that and present for real. So, you know.
I have one thing that is worth mentioning there, and that's, I suppose, this talk in particular. It happened 2 years ago. But the man's name is Ian Barr, and, you know, he's a metal guy. Like, big hair, beard, metal t-shirt, skull. That's the guy. And I knew him. He would help out with some code sprints and stuff. Like, he was a person around the meetup. And he once wrote this blog post about this Markov chain that he trained, and he scraped all the metal lyrics from like metal fan websites, figure out which word was the most metal. He just wrote this blog post about it. And I still think it's one of the funniest things I've ever read. It's quite clever, but highly entertaining. The thing was, though, like, I approached Ian, like, have you considered maybe talking about that? Because this stuff is genius. And he has considered it. So definitely, if you're out there, and if you have like this little quirky blog post where you're, you know, not really doing something super intelligent, but heck, what you're doing is also not stupid, consider submitting, because definitely the talks that are a little bit more on the entertainment side of the spectrum, those are typically the best ones. So keep that in mind, and definitely go to talk at meetups as well. Learning to present is a great skill. But I've met a lot of people like this man who don't realize that they have something really cool to share. So keep that in mind. That's the main advice I have for people who may want to consider speaking.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. That's something what we're sort of trying to do here with this series, is just to sort of get people into the frame of mind that they can give talks and stuff like that. And we appreciate the people who have given us talks so far, including both for yourselves. But essentially, you know, get new people into the whole stream of giving talks, and, you know, traveling abroad and going over to Amsterdam and meeting the community in Amsterdam and Berlin and in London. So, you know, that's the sort of something we really like to hope to achieve with this series. So,
I have to say you goodbye earlier because I have to go. So thank you very much for.
Okay.
Thank you for your talk, Vincent. Sorry, I have to go a bit earlier today. Thanks.
I understand you're a parent. No worries. Have a good one.
Thanks a million, Tatiana. Thank you. It was lovely to see you. Bye-bye.
I'm going to sign off there as well. I'll hand over to you, Laiz, to do the honors.
Perfect. Well, I think we are done here, aren't we? Well, thank you very much, Vincent, for your lovely talk as well. Thank you for inviting the attendees to also speak at PyData. I would also like to ask if anyone that thinks that they could talk about anything, just get in contact with us, and yeah, would be lovely to have you here talking and to host you as well. Maybe I can even come up with a lovely introduction for you too. Let's see. Anyhow, well, thank you very much. It was lovely to meet you, Vincent.
Likewise.
And enjoy the rest of your week.
Yes. Well.